So let's cover a little nuclear medicine here. If you see questions regarding I-131 questions or in general, the NRC CFR 35, what is the criteria for releasing a patient? And specifically, what is that release criteria for palladium 103 and iodine 131? What written instructions need to be given to the patient prior to their release? And what safety precautions must be taken with the I-131 thyroid treatments, and what are your primary concerns for those particular treatments, as well as a patient of yours that had a palladium prostate treatment. The LDR seeds that were put inside the prostate, say that patient passes away. What do you do as a physicist at that point? So to begin, the CFR 35, I would say it's important for you to have read and know that report, what it says, and a lot of the limits. So, for example, they say that if the total effective dose equivalent to any other individual is less than 5 millisieverts, they can be released. So that's one thing you want to remember is the less than 5 millisieverts. So that's for any individual from the exposure of the person who is released. And so if the activity is low enough, if the dose rate is low enough, or if you had done patient-specific dose calculations to prove that no one is going to get this 5 millisieverts from that person being released, they are able to be released at that point. So let's talk about specifically for palladium 103 and iodine 131. So for palladium, we have a less than 3 MR per hour. And remember, this is at 1 meter away. And then for the I-131, we are going to have anything that is less than 7 MR per hour. Same thing at 1 meter. So what written instructions would need to be given to the patient? So it's important to ensure the individual is around other individuals as little as possible. So the person being released, they want to minimize direct contact to pregnant people, to minors. You need to provide any type of breastfeeding instructions to them. Ultimately, anything that will limit external dose. So wherever, maybe if they're riding the bus, try to not do that, because then of course they're surrounded by people. Don't go to public events. All the instructions like that need to be given to the patient so they know what to do once they leave the hospital. And then what safety precautions must be taken with I-131. And so there's a lot of them. You don't have to know this like every single one of them, but the first one is they need to be in a private room by themselves. And this means that they need to have their own bathroom as well. And you need to have the appropriate signage. So whether that is both on the bathroom door and on the door as you walk into that patient's room, you need to do surveys for everyone who enters and leaves that room. You want to have disposable materials. That way they can just be thrown away. Guests are only allowed if the RSO approves this, and also no other personnel. You don't want a bunch of staff going in and out. You want to limit that exposure as small as possible. So maybe 2 or 3 staff members go in throughout the stay of that patient. You don't want any minors. You don't want any pregnant individuals visiting this patient. If the patient needs, to shower, they need to leave their clothes. They need, of course, a survey before the patient leaves, like we just talked about. And you'd want to use a gamma meter for betas and scintillation counter for gammas. So remember, if you're using a Geiger counter, you're not going to be able to measure those gammas. So you want to use both options. You also would want to do a white test of the entire area and be sure that those are less than 200 millirem. And actually, that would have been something good to write. So a white test is less than 200 millirem. Now, what are our primary concerns? So the I-131 for the thyroid cancer, you don't have to worry about the betas as much. You do have to worry about the gammas. The activity is around 50 to 200 millicuries. Those are what you want to focus on in terms of internal dosimetry and then how to attack that thyroid tumor. And then, of course, the radiation protection with everything we just mentioned up here is a very viable answer to discuss on your exam if you're asked something like this question. And then finally, if you had a prostate patient with implanted seeds, they pass away, what do you do? And so at this point, you actually don't have any regulatory responsibility, but potentially you could argue that you have a moral one. And so you could either do an excision of the prostate or take some, I guess pretty much, yeah, you take the prostate out and then you keep it, you store it until decay levels are small enough. Yeah, you could also find other methods of picking up the seeds. I've heard of cremations, and then people take the seeds after the cremation and store the seeds until they're fully decayed. But again, you don't have a regulatory responsibility, but potentially a moral one if you want to go down that road. So that covers all the questions we have right here. If you have any further questions about thyroid, CFR 35, or any other nuke med questions, please comment below. Hope this helps, and we will see you in the next one.